Luke had always lived a quiet life on the edge of the small western town. His ranch was not big, but it was enough for him. He had a few horses, a couple of cows, and long stretches of empty land where the wind carried dust across the fields. Most days he woke before sunrise, fed the animals, checked the fences, and rode across the property to make sure everything was safe. He did not talk much, and people in town often said he was the kind of man who spoke only when needed. But those who knew him understood he had a soft heart hidden under his calm face. One warm afternoon, Luke rode into town to buy supplies. Dust clung to his boots as he stepped off his horse and tied it outside the general store. He expected a normal trip, get what he needed, and head back before the sun dropped too low. But as soon as he opened the door of the store, he noticed someone he had never seen before. A young woman stood near the counter holding a small list in her hand. She looked confused, as if she was unsure what to do next. She tried to ask the shopkeeper something, but her voice was so quiet that even Luke, who was standing nearby, could barely hear anything. Her cheeks were pink with embarrassment, and she kept glancing around nervously. She was clearly shy, but something gentle and warm shone in her eyes. Luke had seen many people come and go in this town, but this girl looked different, soft-spoken, unsure, almost delicate in the way she held herself. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear and took a deep breath before trying again to speak. The shopkeeper, an older man with poor hearing, leaned forward and said, "Speak up, miss." "I didn't catch that." She tried, but her voice trembled again. Luke stepped closer, not wanting to scare her, but wanting to help. "Ma'am," he said gently, "can I help you with something?" The girl looked up at him, and for a moment she didn't say anything. Her eyes widened slightly, and he could see how nervous she was. But she nodded, holding out her list with both hands, as if offering something fragile. I'm supposed to buy these." "For my aunt," she said softly. Luke read the list. Simple things, animal feed, a few tools, and household items. He smiled lightly. "All right. I can help you find these." She relaxed a little and followed him through the aisles. She walked slowly, almost as if she was afraid of knocking something over. Luke pointed things out to her, lifting heavy bags she could not carry and placing them on the counter. She thanked him each time with a shy voice. Her name was Emily, she told him quietly, and she had just moved to town. She was staying with her aunt for a while, helping around the small home and learning how to take care of animals. Luke had met many people in his life, but no one thanked him the way Emily did. She meant every word. Every thank you, every small smile, each one came from her heart. When she laughed nervously, she covered her mouth with her hand, embarrassed even by her own laughter. Luke found himself watching her more than he planned to. Not in a wrong way, but in a gentle way, like someone noticing a small light in a dark room. They finished collecting everything, and she walked with Luke to the counter. As he helped load the supplies onto the wagon outside, he noticed Emily struggling to lift even a small bag of feed. Before she could try again, Luke quietly picked it up and placed it beside the others. She lowered her eyes, her face turning red. "I should help," she whispered. "You are helping," Luke said softly. "You came all this way." "That's not easy." She looked up, surprised by his words. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Lowly, gently, like they truly cared if she felt comfortable. On the ride back to her aunt's house, Emily told him little pieces about her life. She had grown up far away, in a small community where she rarely spoke to strangers. She spent most of her time with her aunt or alone with books. She said she didn't know much about the world outside her home and was nervous being around new people. Luke listened without interrupting. He didn't push her to talk. He let her speak at her own pace. When they reached her aunt's house, Emily stepped down from the wagon and looked at Luke with eyes that held gratitude and something deeper, something unsure but warm. "Thank you," she said again. I felt very lost today." Luke tipped his hat slightly and replied, "You did just fine," said it simply. But the kindness in his voice made Emily's heart flutter. Days passed, and Luke found himself thinking about her more often than he expected. Sometimes, when he rode past town, he would wonder if she would be there. He tried to ignore the feeling, telling himself she was just someone who needed help. But he knew it was more than that. Emily had left an impression on him, something gentle, something soft, that reminded him of things he had forgotten long ago. Like warmth after a long winter. A week later, fate brought them together again. Emily came to the ranch with her aunt, this time to buy hay. She looked even more nervous than before, but when she saw Luke walking out of the barn, her face lit up just a little. She tried not to show it, but Luke noticed. He noticed everything now. They talked again, this time longer. Emily asked about the horses, and Luke showed her how to pet one gently. When her hand shook, he stepped closer, not touching her, just guiding her words with calm instructions. Emily smiled, small but real. Luke realized then that she trusted him. She stood close to him, closer than she would stand to anyone else. And when she spoke more openly, as if she felt safe near him. Her aunt watched quietly, smiling to herself. After they finished loading the hay, Emily's aunt approached Luke and said quietly, "She doesn't talk to many people. You're the first person she's opened up to. It means something." Luke nodded, though he did not fully understand why Emily trusted him. Maybe it was his calm way. Maybe it was because he never rushed her. Maybe it was simply because he saw her really saw her. Over the next few weeks, Emily visited the ranch more often. Sometimes she came with her aunt, sometimes alone to buy small things. Each time, she spoke a little more. Luke learned that she liked quiet places, that she enjoyed sunsets, and that she often felt like she didn't know where she belonged. He listened to her carefully, treating every word as important. One evening, she visited the ranch close to sunset. She stood near the fence, watching the horses run in the pasture, the sky turning orange above her. Luke walked over slowly, not wanting to startle her. "You like watching them?" he asked. "Yes," she answered softly. "They look free," Luke nodded. "You should come by whenever you want. You're welcome here." Emily looked down, her fingers twisting together nervously. "I don't want to bother you." "You don't," he said, his voice steady. "Not at all." She looked at him then, really looked, and for a moment she forgot how shy she usually was. "I feel different here," she admitted quietly. "Safe." Luke felt something shift in his heart. He didn't say anything more, but he knew those words meant more than she realized. Emily was not just another visitor. She had already become someone important to him, someone he wanted to protect, someone he wanted to understand. As the sun set behind them, Emily stood beside Luke in silence. It was not uncomfortable. It was peaceful, the kind of silence that only happens between two people, who feel something they don't know how to explain yet, and though neither of them said it out loud. That evening marked the real beginning of their story, a story built on trust, gentleness, and the quiet bond that formed between a shy girl who had never trusted anyone before and a cowboy who never expected someone like her to walk into his life. Emily began visiting the ranch more often after that calm sunset evening. She didn't always have a reason. Sometimes she came to buy something small. And other times she said she just wanted to walk and clear her mind. Luke never questioned it. He simply welcomed her with the same soft smile, the same quiet voice that made her feel safe from the first day. Luke noticed small things about her. She always hesitated before stepping inside the barn, as if making sure she wasn't intruding. She always tucked her hair behind her ear when she felt shy. And when she laughed, she covered her mouth as if worried about being too loud. Each of these small habits made Luke feel even more gentle toward her. He didn't know when it happened, but he had started looking forward to her visits more than anything else in his day. Emily, on the other hand, felt something changing inside her too. She had never been close to anyone outside her family. She had lived her whole life in a quiet corner, away from crowds and noise, away from attention and judgment. Men, especially, made her nervous. She never knew how to talk to them or how to behave around them. But with Luke, things were different. She didn't have to think before speaking. She didn't have to hide behind long silences. His presence brought her a sense of calm that she had never felt with anyone else. One afternoon, she came to the ranch holding a small basket. She told Luke her aunt had baked bread and wanted him to have some. But her voice trembled slightly as she spoke, and Luke could tell there was more behind the visit than a simple delivery. She stood there, not leaving even after handing him the basket. And Luke sensed she wanted to talk. He invited her to sit on a bench under a tree where the horses grazed nearby. Emily sat on the edge of the bench, her fingers twisting around the edge of her dress. She stared at the ground, trying to gather her courage. "Emily," Luke said softly, "is something bothering you?" She took a deep breath. "I want to tell you something, but I don't know if it will sound strange." "You can tell me anything," Luke replied in a steady tone. She looked up, her eyes uncertain but sincere. "I don't have much experience with people, especially with men. I didn't grow up around them. I don't know how to talk, how to act, how to trust." Her voice became faint. "You're the first person I've ever trusted like this." Luke felt the weight of her words. He leaned forward slightly, not touching her, but offering his attention fully. "That means a lot," he said quietly, "and I'm glad you trust me." Thanks. Emily's cheeks turned pink. She pushed a small breath out and whispered, "You're my first. The first man I've ever let this close to me." Her voice cracked on the word first. She wasn't trying to impress him or get a reaction. She was simply telling a truth she had kept to herself for years. Luke didn't smile or tease her. He didn't look surprised or proud. He understood the seriousness behind the confession. Emily was giving him something fragile, something she had never given to anyone else. He chose his words carefully. "You don't have to be nervous around me," he said gently. "I won't judge you. I won't rush you, and I won't do anything to break that trust." Emily's eyes softened. A tiny bit of tension left her shoulders. She felt understood, not embarrassed. She felt accepted, not pressured. She whispered, "I'm scared sometimes. That I'll say something wrong? That someone will think I'm strange." "Emily," Luke said, his voice low and kind, "you're not strange. You're honest. And careful. Those are good things." She looked at him again, and this time her eyes glistened slightly. Not with sadness, but with relief. For a while, they sat in silence as the wind moved gently through the grass. A horse wandered close, and Emily reached out her hand. Luke noticed she didn't shake as much as she used to. She was getting comfortable. She was learning. And she was sharing these small moments with him. Over the next few days, Emily opened up more. She talked about her childhood, how she never went to big gatherings, how she felt nervous around strangers, and how she always stayed close to her aunt because she felt protected with her. Luke listened patiently, never interrupting, never questioning why she felt the way she did. Instead, he shared pieces of his own life, his work on the ranch. The long days in the sun, the quiet nights alone, the lessons he had learned over the years. Emily enjoyed listening to him. His voice was steady and warm, like a safe place in a world that sometimes felt too big. Sometimes she would ask him small questions, curious about things she had never seen before, like how he trained horses or how he fixed fences after storms. Luke showed her everything, happy to see her interest. One day she visited during the evening. The sky glowed orange and pink as the sun slowly dipped behind the hills. Emily's aunt was not with her this time. She had walked all the way to the ranch alone. Her steps were small and careful, but there was a quiet determination in her movements, as if she had been thinking about something important. Luke saw her from a distance and walked over to greet her. Emily tried to smile, but her face was a little tense. "Did something happen?" he asked gently. "I just wanted to talk," she said softly. Luke nodded and led her to a quiet spot near the pasture, where the sky stretched wide above them. Emily stood close to the fence, gripping the wooden rail lightly. Luke waited patiently, knowing she needed time to gather her thoughts. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "I've never told anyone the things I told you, not even my aunt."
Oh.
Luke's eyebrows raised slightly. "Why me?" Emily swallowed hard. "Because when I talk to you, I don't feel scared. I don't feel small. I feel safe." She looked down quickly, her face turning red. "I don't know why. I just do." Luke stood beside her, leaving just enough space so she wouldn't feel crowded. You don't have to explain, he said quietly. Sometimes people feel safe with certain people. That's not something you need to be embarrassed about. Emily let out a shaky breath, as if releasing something she had held inside for too long. I'm still learning how to be around others, she said. Sometimes, even when I'm talking to you, my heart beats fast because I'm afraid I'll disappoint you. Luke looked at her with calm, steady eyes. You could never disappoint me just by being yourself. Emily blinked, surprised by his certainty. I mean it, he added. You're trying. You're honest. And you're brave for trusting someone for the first time. Emily's eyes softened. No one had ever called her brave. She had always thought of herself as someone who hid, someone who avoided the world because she didn't know how to face it. But Luke saw her differently. He saw her small steps as courage. She took a slow breath and whispered, "Thank you for being patient with me." Luke thought for a moment, then said something he had been holding in his heart for days. I don't want you to feel you have to change anything about yourself when you're with me. Not your voice, not your habits, not your fears. You don't owe me anything. Emily felt her chest warm. Her hands relaxed against the fence, and Luke continued quietly, If I'm the first person you trust, then I'll do everything I can to be worthy of that trust. Something in Emily's heart opened gently. She stared at him for a long moment, the colors of the sunset reflecting in her eyes. She didn't know how to describe what she felt, but it was something new, something soft and hopeful. The more she talked to him, the more she understood how different he was from anyone she had ever known. He didn't rush her. He didn't pressure her. He didn't expect anything from her. He simply stood beside her, steady and kind, giving her the space she needed to breathe. That evening, when she finally began her walk home, she looked back once. Luke was still standing near the fence, watching her with the same calm expression. Emily felt her heart flutter. She whispered to herself, He's the first, and maybe the only. And without knowing it, she took the first true step toward the future they both quietly hoped for. A week after Emily confessed that Luke was the first man she had ever trusted, the weather changed suddenly. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, pushing out the warm sunlight and casting a heavy gray shade over the land. The air grew cold, and the wind picked up fast. It was the kind of storm that made ranchers hurry to bring their animals inside. Luke could feel something strong blowing in from the east, stronger than the storms he was used to. He had just finished pulling the barn doors shut when he noticed something moving on the road far away. At first, he thought it was just loose branches or dust being blown by the wind. But then the shape moved again, small, unsteady. Luke narrowed his eyes, trying to see clearly through the rising dust. After a few seconds, he recognized the shape of a person. His heart skipped Emily. She was walking alone, her shoulders hunched against the harsh wind, her dress clinging to her legs. She held her arms around herself, shaking as she pushed through the storm. Luke didn't even think. He rushed toward her, boots hitting the ground hard, wind slapping against his hat. When he reached her, she was breathing heavily, her hair tangled by the storm, her cheeks pale from cold. Emily, he called out. What are you doing out here? She lifted her head slowly, relief flooding her tired face. Luke, the road. It started flooding. I couldn't make it home. Her voice trembled so much that Luke stepped closer on instinct, offering the shelter of his presence. Drops of rain began hitting them as the sky opened wider. Luke placed his arm gently but firmly behind her back, not holding her, only guiding her, and said, Come on. You can't stay out here. You'll get sick. Emily nodded weakly and let him lead her toward the ranch house. She didn't resist. She didn't argue. She trusted him completely. Lightning flashed behind them as they hurried inside. The warm air of the house wrapped around them the moment they stepped in. Emily stood by the door, shivering slightly as she tried to brush the water from her dress. Luke grabbed a dry blanket from the living room and handed it to her. Here, sit down. Warm yourself. Emily held the blanket close, her fingers trembling. She sat on the edge of a chair, trying not to make a mess of his floor. Luke noticed her hesitation. You don't need to worry about anything, he said calmly. I just want you safe. Emily looked up, her eyes glistening. Not from tears, but from a deep sense of relief. I didn't know where else to go, she admitted softly. When the water started rising, I got scared. I came here without thinking. You did the right thing, Luke replied. This storm is worse than usual. You stay here until it passes. A loud crack of thunder shook the walls, and Emily flinched. Luke moved to the stove to heat water for tea. Emily watched him, her heart slowly calming. She had never been inside his house before. It was humble, with wooden walls, old furniture, a quiet warmth that felt like him, steady, simple, gentle. After a few minutes, Luke placed a warm cup in front of her. She wrapped her hands around it, letting the heat sink into her cold fingers. Thank you, she whispered. Luke nodded and sat across from her, giving her space but staying close enough so she didn't feel alone. For a while, the storm raged outside, rain pounding against the windows. Emily's eyes followed the sound, her body tense. Luke noticed and said softly, You're safe here. The house is strong. The storm can roar all at once. Sit won't touch you inside. Emily's shoulders relaxed little by little. She took a small sip of tea, and warmth spread through her chest. After a long silence, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry I showed up suddenly. I didn't want to be a burden. Luke leaned forward slightly. You're not a burden. Not even for a second. His voice was firm but gentle, leaving no space for doubt. Emily's cheeks warmed. She lowered her eyes shyly. I'm still learning how to deal with things. When danger happens, my mind freezes. I don't know what to do. It's embarrassing. It's not embarrassing, Luke said. It's human. His words sank deep into her heart. No one had ever spoken to her with such understanding. A soft silence settled between them, broken only by the storm outside. Emily stared into her cup, gathering her courage, and then she said something she had never said to anyone before. Luke, I've never trusted anyone the way I trust you. Luke felt something shift inside him. He didn't move suddenly or speak quickly. He let the weight of her words settle gently between them before answering. Emily, I won't break that trust. I promise. She looked up at him then, really looked, her eyes wide and searching. There was no fear in her gaze now, only hope. Something delicate, something new. What if I make mistakes? She asked, her voice fragile. Then I'll be patient, Luke replied softly. What if I get scared sometimes? Then I'll stay by you. What if I don't know how to do things that most people already know? I'll teach you. Slowly, only when you want to learn. Emily exhaled shakily, as if letting out years of hidden fears. She pressed the blanket closer around her and whispered, You're the first man I've ever shared these thoughts with. Luke nodded gently, and I'll protect every one of them. Another loud crash of thunder echoed outside, but this time Emily didn't flinch as much. She looked at Luke again, and a soft smile appeared, small, but full of trust. As the hours passed, the storm grew heavier, trapping them inside. Luke placed extra logs in the fireplace, and the warm glow slowly filled the room. Emily watched the flames dance, her heart steadying with each passing minute. She began telling Luke's stories from her childhood, stories she had never shared with anyone. She talked about how she used to hide behind her aunt when strangers approached, how school overwhelmed her, how she always felt like she lived inside a shell she didn't know how to break. Luke listened with full attention, as if every detail mattered. At one point, Emily lowered her eyes and said quietly, I used to think something was wrong with me, that I wasn't normal. Luke shook his head, his voice gentle, but firm. There's nothing wrong with you. You're kind. You're gentle. You feel deeply. That's not a weakness. Emily felt her throat tighten. No one had ever said those words to her. And Emily, he added softly, you came here today because you trusted me. That's courage. She blinked, touched by his words. I didn't even think. My feet just brought me here. That's because your heart chose where you felt safe. Emily swallowed, her cheeks turning warm again. You make me feel safe, Luke. Luke didn't look away. I'm glad. Lightning lit the room for a moment, and in that brief flash, Emily saw something in Luke's eyes, something steady, something protective, something that made her chest tighten gently. Emily hesitated, then spoke with small courage. Luke, when I said you're my first? I meant the first man I've let into my life. The first I've trusted. The first I've shared my fears with. The first who made me feel seen. Luke's heart softened even more. He placed his hand on the table, not touching hers, but close enough for her to reach if she wanted. And if you let me, he said quietly, I'll be the last, too. Emily stared at his hand, then at his face. Her breath shook softly, not from fear, but from the strange warmth spreading in her chest. She didn't take his hand, but she moved just a little closer, showing her trust in the only way she knew how. The storm continued through the night, but inside the small ranch house, a different kind of calm grew, low, warm, and steady. Emily wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't alone. She was with someone who respected her, protected her, and promised to never rush her. And as she rested on the chair, wrapped in the blanket and warmed by the fire, she whispered in her heart something she didn't dare say out loud yet. He's the only man I want in my life. The only one. The storm finally ended the next morning. When Luke opened the door, the air outside was fresh and cool, carrying the smell of wet soil and rain-washed grass. Water pooled in the low parts of the land, and the sky was still covered with pale gray clouds. Emily stood behind him, wrapped in the blanket he had given her, watching the calm scene with quiet relief. She hadn't slept much, but for the first time in her life she felt completely safe. Even during chaos, Luke glanced back at her, noticing how tired she looked, but also how peaceful her eyes were. It's safe now, he said softly. You can rest a bit more if you want. Emily shook her head gently. I feel okay now. I just didn't expect to fall asleep here. Her cheeks warmed as she remembered how she had dozed off near the fireplace during the night. Comforted by the quiet crackling sound and Luke sitting nearby to make sure she was all right, you needed rest, Luke replied simply. Anyone would have been scared in a storm like that. Emily looked down, gripping the blanket tighter. Thank you for staying near me, she whispered. I woke up once during the night, and I saw you sitting close. It made me feel safe again. Luke didn't say anything for a moment. He just nodded, as if silently telling her that being there for her wasn't something he had done out of obligation. It was something he wanted to do. Emily's aunt lived across the rising road, but it would take time before the water fully went down. Emily didn't seem anxious about that. Instead, she wandered around the living room quietly, running her fingers over a wooden carving, glancing at Luke's books on the shelf, and observing the space that reflected his simple, honest life. It feels peaceful here, she murmured. It's quieter than most places, Luke agreed. Sometimes too quiet. Emily turned toward him, her eyes gentle. I don't mind quiet. Luke watched her for a moment, then walked toward the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Emily followed him slowly, unsure if she should help or sit. She didn't want to assume anything, but Luke noticed her hesitation and smiled slightly. You can sit. I'll take care of it. Emily obeyed, but her heart warmed. No one had ever made space for her like this calm patient, without expecting anything in return. As she sat there, she thought back to the night before. She remembered the storm shaking the walls, the wind howling outside, and her fear rising like a tide. But she also remembered how Luke's voice steadied her, how his presence kept her grounded, how he promised to be patient with her. She realized then that this wasn't a small moment in her life. It wasn't something she would forget when the storm passed. It was a turning point, quiet but powerful. When Luke placed a simple breakfast in front of her warm biscuits, a small bowl of fruit, and tea, Emily thanked him softly. They ate in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence that spoke of trust, of understanding, of a new closeness neither had expected to grow so quickly. After they finished, Emily stood by the window, watching the horses wander slowly across the wet pasture. Luke stepped beside her, careful not to startle her. She let out a small breath. I used to think I'd never find a place where I truly felt safe, she said quietly. But yesterday, I didn't think. My feet just brought me here. Luke nodded. Your heart knew where to go. Emily looked up at him with a soft gaze. I think it did. The road didn't clear until late afternoon. Emily's aunt appeared in the distance, walking carefully across the muddy ground, relief washing over her face when she saw Emily standing on the porch. She hurried up and held her niece by the shoulders, checking her from head to toe. "Emily, are you hurt? I was worried all night when the storm got worse." Emily held her aunt's hands gently. "I'm all right. Luke took care of me." Her aunt looked at Luke and nodded with gratitude. "Thank you, truly." Luke tipped his hat respectfully. "She came here just in time." "I'm glad she did." Emily's aunt noticed the softness in her niece's eyes, a softness she hadn't seen in years. She smiled knowingly but said nothing. After making sure Emily was ready to walk home, she said, "We should go before the water rises again." Emily nodded. But before turning away, she looked back at Luke. Her heart felt heavy, as if leaving the ranch meant leaving a piece of herself behind. Luke saw the hesitation in her eyes. "You can come back anytime," he said gently. "You know that." Emily swallowed softly, her voice barely escaping her lips. "I will." Luke watched her walk away with her aunt. Emily kept glancing back, each time her gaze meeting Luke's steady eyes until distance finally separated them. Even then, something warm remained between them, thin as a thread, but strong enough to pull them closer in the days ahead. The next morning, Emily returned. She stood at the gate looking unsure, as if she worried she was bothering him. Luke stepped out of the barn when he saw her and walked toward her. "You came early," he said. Emily lowered her eyes. "I couldn't stop thinking about yesterday." Luke waited quietly. Emily took a deep breath and continued, "I wanted to be sure that you didn't mind me being here." Luke shook his head gently. "Emily, you're always welcome." Her heart fluttered at those words. She stepped inside the ranch, walking close to him, but not too close, still letting her comfort grow at its own pace. She helped him with small tasks, feeding the horses, brushing them gently, carrying light tools. Luke explained things slowly, letting her learn without fear of mistakes. While they worked, Emily found herself looking at him often. His calm manner, his quiet strength, his steady presence, everything about him made her feel she had found something she didn't even know she had been searching for. And Luke, though he didn't show it loudly, felt the same. Every time she smiled, every time she trusted him a little more, something warm blossomed inside him. Later that evening, as the sun lowered and covered the sky in soft gold, Luke and Emily walked up the small hill behind the ranch. The world felt peaceful after days of storm, as if nature itself had paused to breathe. They sat side by side on the grassy hill, close enough that Emily could feel the heat from his arm. Luke glanced at her and asked softly, "What's on your mind?" Emily took a moment before answering. "I've been afraid for so long. Afraid of people, afraid of being judged, afraid of trusting someone. But with you, all that fear becomes small." She turned her face toward him, her eyes shining with honesty. "You're the first person who made me feel this way." Luke held her gaze, something steady and strong in his own eyes. "And I meant what I said," he replied softly. "If I'm your first, I want to be your only." Emily's breath caught. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, softer than anything she had ever felt in her life. Slowly, without rushing, she moved just a little closer, resting her hand lightly near his on the grass. She didn't touch him, but the gesture was clear. She wanted him near. She trusted him. She was ready for the quiet beginning of something real. Luke understood. He didn't take her hand. He didn't move suddenly. He simply shifted closer, letting his presence be the comfort she sought. Emily let out a slow breath, her nervousness melting into a peaceful calm. They sat together as the sky darkened into twilight. The air cooled, the stars appeared one by one, and the world around them became silent. Emily glanced at Luke with a soft smile. I want to build my life with someone who makes me feel safe. Someone kind. Someone patient." She paused, her voice trembling gently. "Someone like you." Luke's heart tightened in the most comforting way. "And I want to be that man," he said quietly. "Not just for today, but for the rest of our lives." Emily felt tears rise not from sadness, but from overwhelming relief and hope. She blinked them away quickly, embarrassed, but Luke noticed. He looked at her with such gentle understanding that she didn't feel the need to hide. She whispered, "Thank you. For waiting for me?" "For being patient," Luke nodded. "Emily, I'll always be patient with you." The wind brushed softly across the hill. Carrying the quiet promise between them into the open sky, Emily leaned her head slightly toward him, just enough to show she wasn't afraid anymore. Luke stayed still, letting her choose every step. They didn't need to speak further. Their silence was full of meaning, full of trust, full of a future slowly beginning. And that night, as the stars sparkled overhead, Emily realized something she had never believed she could feel. She had found her place, her home, her heart's safe ground, and it was with him, the cowboy she trusted, the man who vowed to be her only, the one she knew she would choose again and again without fear.